The Wall Street Journal is reporting tonight that former Republican Congressman Pete Sessions has been subpoenaed for documents related to Rudy Giuliani's business dealings with Ukraine and his involvement in efforts to oust the U.S. ambassador in Kiev, as well as any interactions between Mr. Sessions, Mr. Giuliani, and 4 of Mr. Giuliani's associates who were indicted last week on campaign finance and conspiracy accounts. Mr. Giuliani is the primary focus of the subpoena. Today, Rudy Giuliani defied a congressional subpoena from House Democrats for documents related to his dealings with Ukraine. Rudy Giuliani told ABC News, if they enforce it, then we will see what happens. An official working on the impeachment inquiry told NBC News that House Democrats will be forced to consider Rudy Giuliani's refusal to comply with the subpoena as additional evidence of obstruction and may infer that the evidence withheld would substantiate the accusations of President Trump's misconduct and efforts to cover it up. Rudy Giuliani confirmed that he is now operating without his own personal criminal defense lawyer at a time when he is now under federal criminal investigation in New York City. Today, multiple reports reveal that Rudy Giuliani was paid $500,000 to consult for a Ukrainian company co-founded by Lev Parnas, one of the Giuliani associates who was arrested last week. The timing indicates that Rudy Giuliani earned this money around the same time that he began working closely with Lev Parnas and another indicted associate, Igor Fruman, to investigate Joe Biden and his family. Joining us now is Barbara McQuade, a former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, and Barrett Berger, a former federal prosecutor for the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York. Both are MSNBC legal analysts. And Barrett, as a veteran of the Southern District of New York, I want to get your reaction to the irony and the substance of Rudy Giuliani now apparently being under criminal investigation by the Southern District, a U.S. Attorney's office that he used to run.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty startling, to say the least. I think what you'll see throughout the Southern District of New York's investigation is an investigation that will proceed in many ways very differently than the congressional investigation. First, just because somebody doesn't want to comply with a subpoena, they can't just voluntarily choose not to when that subpoena has the possibility of contempt of court behind it. The Southern District of New York is not going to look favorably on people that decide to put forward baseless arguments or just not show up for a grand jury subpoena. So I think you'll see a lot more cooperation with the investigation, but certainly the fact that the Southern District of New York has now turned its sights on Rudy Giuliani is significant, and he should be worried.
And Barbara, it seems Rudy Giuliani is now doing for himself what he has been doing in the past for Donald Trump, which is he's admitting to and revealing facts that he knows are going to come out eventually, like the $500,000. He knows eventually, certainly any federal government subpoenas for his financial records are going to be enforced very quickly, and that information is going to come out.
Yeah, that is a strategy that prosecutors typically use. I'm sure Rudy Giuliani recalls this strategy from his time as a federal prosecutor. If there are bad facts that are going to come out, you want to be the one to disclose them. So you can say it's no big deal. You can disclose it on your terms and you can explain it as it comes out, as opposed to playing defense and having to react to it. And that's if you're fairly certain that those details are going to come out. But, you know, this reporting that Rudy Giuliani is now representing himself. He doesn't have a lawyer, and he's thinking about getting a criminal attorney. Reminds me of the old adage that he who represents himself has a fool for a client. And I think one of the things that Rudy Giuliani would hear if he had a lawyer is that he should shut the hell up.
Yeah, that seems to be the hardest thing for him to do. And Barrett, it's one of the things that is so strange about him, that any professional lawyer who's ever been near a courtroom knows this, knows the value of silence, especially knows the value of silence in relation to ongoing investigations. Rudy Giuliani seems to have lost all comprehension of that, and who knows what else he no longer understands.
Right, and this may actually backfire on him in a number of different ways. I mean, one of the arguments put forth in this letter to Congress about why he was not going to comply with their subpoena is because he said there may be some attorney-client privilege issues that he would have. Well, by continuing to speak publicly about this very subject of the subpoena, he in many ways is just flatly waiving any legitimate claim that he may have had to some sort of a privilege. The more you talk publicly about what is supposed to be a confidential conversation, you've completely waived the privilege. So while it is great for Congress and possibly for the Southern District of New York that he continues to speak publicly, they're sort of gathering that evidence from his very mouth, it may backfire on him in the long run.
Let's listen to what Congressman Mike Quigley said about Rudy Giuliani's role in what they're investigating.
Rudy combines it all, though. You're right. First of all, it's shadow government and bad foreign policy. A man with little or no expertise, no security clearance, working in the shadows and moving forward with national policy. What role is he playing? A personal attorney for the president, operating under the State Department? This leads to extraordinary mistakes, one that we're witnessing in plain view.
And Barbara, we know Rudy Giuliani was involved in conversations with Ambassador Sondland, with the two guys who've now been arrested, with so many people in this thing. And the attorney-client privilege does not extend to any communication that you have shared beyond just you and your client. And so Rudy Giuliani's ability to invoke attorney-client privilege is something he may have shattered himself in his own conversations with other people.
Yes, I think we're seeing again and again with this administration and Rudy Giuliani tossing off these terms that are familiar to people, like due process and hearsay and here attorney-client privilege, without really delving into exactly what that means. Attorney-client privilege actually has a pretty narrow definition. It is communications between a lawyer and client for the purpose of seeking legal advice. And so anything that you say is not necessarily protected. And when Giuliani is acting as an agent, but not a lawyer for President Trump, that activity is not protected by the attorney-client privilege. And as you say, Lawrence, conversations you have with other people waives the privilege. And so I think it's going to be difficult for Giuliani to hide behind this defense of the attorney-client privilege.
Barbara McQuade, Barrett Berger, thank you both very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.